The shuttle touched down with a muted thrum of repulsor pads against glass steel. Cale Draven adjusted the strap of his sidearm harness as the access hatch hissed open, releasing a wave of recycled cool air. Echelon Spire loomed above and around him, an orbiting marvel of diplomacy and precision engineering, its metal bones wrapped in layers of mirrored plating and radiant light. It was meant to be a symbol of peace. To Cale, it felt more like a trap held together by polished tension. "Draven, get moving!" barked Lieutenant Chen as she disembarked just behind him. "You're 2 minutes behind already." Cale bit back a retort and descended the ramp, eyes scanning the station's landing deck. The place was immaculate, no dust, no rust, no weapons in sight. Yet every glimmering panel and diplomatic banner made the hair on the back of his neck prickle. The calm was too complete. He wasn't supposed to be here. 2 days ago, he'd been running low-priority escort duty along the asteroid fringe. Then, without warning, Command rerouted him to this summit as emergency detail. No briefing. No prep. Just the order. Protect the Varelli Diplomat. Her name is Delira. No mistakes. Now, stepping into the welcoming corridor with mirrored walls and softly pulsing lights, Cale felt every eye on him. Humans wore crisp black uniforms, their boots clicking in practiced rhythm. The Varelli moved differently, taller, lither, with robes that shimmered like woven flame and glints of fur visible at the collar and sleeves. No two walked the same way, but they shared a stillness that unnerved him. They moved like they didn't need to move quickly. Like they could snap your neck before you saw them coming. And then, she entered. The reception hall's arched doorway parted with a soft hiss, and she stepped through like an ember riding a breeze. Ambassador Delira of the Varelli was not what Cale expected. She wasn't draped in ceremonial opulence like the elders who surrounded her. She wore a minimalist deep red sash over a form-fitting dark tunic, adorned only with thin golden embroidery in the shape of stars. Her fur was a rich, sunset orange, sleek and brushed to a radiant sheen. The fur around her neck flared slightly like a high collar, and her large, amber-gold eyes scanned the room with quiet precision. Her ears stood upright, sharp and alert, angled in a way that made her look perpetually aware of everything. But it was her presence that struck Cale the hardest. She moved with no hesitation, no attempt to soften her authority to make the humans around her comfortable. She didn't command attention. She owned it. Cale didn't realize he was staring until a hard elbow jabbed into his ribs. "Draven," Lieutenant Chen muttered through gritted teeth. "You're not sightseeing. Eyes forward." "Right," Cale said, blinking. "Just didn't expect her to look so careful," Chen warned. The introductions began. Ambassador Legrand of Earth stepped forward, hands folded respectfully. "Ambassador Delira, we are honored to host you aboard Echelon Spire. May our talks be fruitful and lasting." The Lyra's voice was smooth and melodic, soft, yet crystalline enough to cut through the room's quiet. "Let us hope the fruit is not bitter, Ambassador Legrand. We've tasted too many failed accords." Cale didn't miss the subtle wince behind Legrand's practiced smile. As Lyra turned slightly, her gaze swept over the human delegation and landed on Cale. He froze. Her eyes held his a moment longer than protocol allowed. Measured. Curious. Then she turned away without comment. But that one glance rattled him. Chen leaned closer. "You were told not to draw attention." "I didn't," Cale whispered. "She saw you. That's enough." But even as they moved deeper into the hall, forming two parallel lines for the ceremonial welcome, Cale couldn't shake the strange sensation lingering from her gaze. Not fear. Not intimidation. It was recognition. As if she already knew him. The formal procession moved deeper into the central chamber of Echelon Spire, a towering dome with crystal glass walls that revealed the expanse of stars and the fractured light of a nearby nebula. Diplomats from 12 systems gathered along the mezzanine levels, their faces unreadable behind years of political polish. Cale followed his assigned position, 3 paces behind the human delegation, exactly parallel to the Varelli security escort on the opposite side. He kept his eyes scanning, checking every angle, every face, every shadow. Protocol demanded stillness. Kale preferred tension in motion. His instincts prickled again. The Varelli escort was stiff, too stiff. Most of them were ceremonial, not tactical. But their lead, a silver and black furred male with high-rank beads woven into his mane, kept checking a wrist device. Subtle. Repetitive. Not normal. Chen's voice buzzed in Kale's earpiece. "Keep an eye on the Varelli captain. Something's off about his movement patterns." "Already tracking him," Kale whispered. Then, like a drop of ice down the spine, it happened. Kale caught it in a high corner of his vision, just a flicker, on the eastern balcony above the procession line. A figure shifted behind one of the curved columns. Not in uniform. No ID badge. Too quick to be a curious onlooker. A shadow too deliberate. He tapped his mic. "Unidentified movement. Upper East Quadrant. Doesn't match station attire." "Could be a tech," Chen replied. "Not carrying tools. Doesn't match body language." Another shift, this time in the opposite corner. West side. Kale's voice sharpened. "Two more. Flanking pattern." Then he saw it. A gleam of metal. A small, modular device unfolding in the balcony's shadows. A rifle barrel catching the low light. "Gun!" He barked into the channel, and sprinted forward. He vaulted the diplomatic barrier, drawing his sidearm in a single, fluid motion. Every rule he'd been drilled was shattered under the weight of urgency. He crossed the sacred no-touch zone, lunged toward the Varelli delegation, and slammed into the Lyra just as the air split with a high-pitched crack. A pulse round screamed through the space where she'd been standing. Kale tackled her to the floor behind the dais as screams erupted. Shards of shattered crystal rained from the balconies. Another blast detonated near the ceiling, sending smoke and lights cascading in bursts. Beneath him, the Lyra growled, struggling against his weight. "What do you think you're doing?" "Saving your life," Kale snapped, shielding her as another blast rocked the far end of the hall. Kale kept his body pressed over the Lyra's, shielding her as a third pulse shot tore through the decorative glasswork above them. Fragments rained like a deadly glitter, skimming the edge of his shoulder plate. The acrid scent of scorched stone filled the air. "I said get off me!" The Lyra hissed beneath him, her claws pressed against his chest, not slashing, but definitely not gentle either. He looked down at her, eyes flashing. "Not until you stop glowing like a sniper's dream." She froze. Her fur, naturally iridescent under the station lights, shimmered in pulses of copper and gold, easy to spot. Easy to target. Her voice was suddenly quiet. "Oh. Yeah. Oh." He grunted, shifting slightly to keep his frame over hers. "You're a literal beacon." Footsteps and shouts echoed from the side corridors. Human and Varelli security were scrambling to respond, but there was no clear chain of command. Kale tapped his comm. "Chen, we've got 3 confirmed assailants. 2 balconies. 1 moving toward the west corridor exit. Engage?" "Affirmative," Chen replied, breathless. "Your override authorization is on record now. Go." The Lyra shoved at him again. "I need to stand." "Not yet," Kale ordered, rolling them both behind a shattered pillar just as another energy pulse blew a smoking crater into the floor where she had just been. She stared at him, panting. "You knew how to move. How to protect a Varelli." "I trained for interspecies combat." He peeked over the pillar, aimed, and fired a short, controlled burst at the far balcony. One attacker dropped their weapon and disappeared from view. "Mostly in simulations. This is a little more intimate?" she offered coolly, her ears flicking. "I was going to say alive." He reached down, hand curling around her wrist. "We have to move. Panic room's in the east wing. You know the station's schematics better than I do. Fastest route?" The Lyra studied him a beat too long before nodding. "Service corridor behind the mural wall. There's a hidden passage for dignitary evacuation. This way." She led, crouched low, tail flicking for balance. Kale followed close, sidearm raised, his free hand constantly scanning the shadows with the tension of muscle memory. The corridor door slid open at her touch, revealing a dim hallway lined with maintenance conduits and echoing with distant alarm chimes. "Ambassador!" a voice called. The Lyra paused, recognizing the voice. Her advisor, Virexon, came stumbling around the corner. "The panic room! Come quickly!" "The humans!" "She's with me!" Kale barked. Sen's gaze dropped to their joined hands. His fur rippled. "Protocol!" "Ignore it!" the Lyra snapped. "He saved my life. Where's the rest of my guard?" "Scattered," Sen said grimly. "But Director Tavros has assumed command. He wants you off the station now." "No." The Lyra straightened, glancing at Kale. "Not until I know who ordered this hit. And why you all failed to stop it." Sen stiffened, eyes narrowing, but said nothing. They continued moving, the walls of the corridor pressing closer now. In the flickering light, Kale glanced at the Lyra's expression, focused, furious, proud. And for the first time, he realized something that went far beyond protocol. She didn't just want to survive. She wanted the truth. The corridor narrowed into a sloping maintenance shaft, dimly lit and damp with condensation from the station's atmospheric regulators. Pipes ran along the walls, some ancient, others gleaming with recent upgrades. Every footstep echoed more than Kale liked. The Lyra kept her pace swift and deliberate. Despite her flowing tail and ceremonial tunic, now torn and stained, she moved like someone who knew combat, not just diplomacy. He admired that, even if the situation meant he couldn't say it aloud. 20 meters ahead, she murmured. "There's an override panel behind that wall panel with the Varelli Suncrest engraving." "You memorized every emergency exit on this station?" Kale asked. "I helped design them." He nodded with new respect. "Remind me never to play strategy against you." Before she could respond, a faint vibration rippled through the deck beneath their boots. Not mechanical. Not routine. Kale raised a hand. "Stop." They both crouched behind a wall console. The vibrations grew louder, joined by the unmistakable hiss of boots over polyglass flooring. Voices 3 or 4. Male. Speaking low Varelli dialect, clipped and urgent. The Lyra's ears twitched toward the sound. "Security detail," she whispered. "But not mine." "How can you tell?" "They're not using formation signals." Kale risked a glance around the corner. 4 armed figures in Varelli combat armor approached from the rear entrance of the corridor. One of them checked a wrist beacon that flashed with the Lyra's biosignature. They weren't looking to guard her. They were tracking her. "Confirmed hostile," Kale said under his breath. "They've got your ID beacon locked." The Lyra's eyes widened slightly. "They want to finish what the snipers started." "We can't fight 4 in a corridor this narrow. We'll go loud and they'll pin us in seconds." "I can mask my beacon," she said, already tapping into her wrist device. "But it'll only give us a short window before they realize I've gone dark." Kale weighed options. "There's a utility ladder down to the venting substructure. We can drop to the waste filtration crawlway and come back up near the comm tower. Not comfortable. Not dignified. But survivable. Let's go." They moved in silence, reaching the Suncrest panel the Lyra had mentioned. She pressed her palm to the engraving, and it slid open with a quiet SHHK. The ladder descended into darkness. Stale air wafted upward. Kale gestured. "I'll go first." The Lyra paused at the edge. "You're still bleeding." "I've been bleeding for 20 minutes. It hasn't killed me yet." She said nothing, only watched him with an unreadable expression as he climbed into the shaft and disappeared below. A moment later, she followed, closing the panel behind them. Inside the narrow shaft, the world above faded into muffled silence. Water dripped. Fans whirred. And in the dark, cramped space, her voice found him. "You're not like the others," she said quietly. "Never said I was." "No, but you don't flinch. Not when they look at me like I'm something wild. Not when I touch you. Not when I order you around." You're not wild, Kale said. You're smart, strategic, and a little terrifying. A soft laugh escaped her, barely more than a breath. You know what that means in my culture? A compliment. Then I guess I like terrifying women. Then you're in the wrong profession, Kale Draven. He looked back up the shaft, their eyes meeting through the gloom. Or exactly where I'm supposed to be. They emerged from the utility shaft into a narrow maintenance conduit barely wide enough for them to crouch side by side. The air was dense with humidity, thick with the hum of ventilation motors and the occasional hiss of steam vents. Pipes crisscrossed the passage like arteries, warm to the touch, vibrating with the pulse of Echelon Spire's life support systems. Kale wiped grime from his forehead and muttered, You know, I was told this detail would be all diplomatic receptions and dignified silence. The Lyra, moving beside him with feline grace despite the tight space, smirked. Then someone lied. She stopped suddenly and tilted her head, ears twitching. There's a coolant line up ahead that feeds into the lower control annex. If we crawl under it, we can drop into the subcom array without triggering the external sensors. You memorize everything? Kale asked, genuinely amazed. I forget unimportant things. Like birthdays. Or my diplomatic security team apparently being traitors. Kale chuckled. You're handling this well. You've seen me in a gown, Draven. This is my real environment. The banter faded as they reached the junction. The Lyra ducked low, guiding them under a wide coolant tube slick with condensation. Her tail brushed his arm as she crawled through, the soft rustle of her fur oddly comforting in the mechanical dark. Once inside the small chamber of the subcom array, Kale pulled the hatch closed behind them and sealed it with a manual override bolt. He collapsed into a crouch, breathing hard, and checked his sidearm. 1 full charge. No backups. The Lyra moved to the console, long claws tapping quickly over the screen. I can't access the main security feeds from here, but I can ping hidden logs. There, look! A burst of data spilled across the screen. Images. Maps. Clearance protocols. Kale leaned in. These are troop movement orders. Why would these be routed through a diplomatic comm relay? Because someone didn't want them appearing on military logs, the Lyra said, her voice sharpening. This isn't just an assassination attempt. Someone rerouted half the station's guard rotations right before the attack. She paused, scrolling down. Here. That override code belongs to. She went still. Kale saw the name too. Virexen, he said, jaw tightening. Your advisor. The Lyra looked stricken, only for a moment, then her eyes went cold. He's been with me since I was first promoted. I trusted him. Kale put a hand on her shoulder, brief, grounding. Then let's make sure he pays for it. But before they could download the logs, the console flickered. A news signal interrupted their access. It was a voice. Ambassador the Lyra. Sergeant Draven. You've made a mess. Kale turned slowly. The console now displayed a blank transmission screen, the voice processed through a mechanical filter. You're clever. I'll give you that. But your survival ends here. Security lockdown initiated. The screen went dark. Outside the sealed hatch, a siren began to wail. Lockdown engaged. Move, Kale said instantly. We're not getting boxed in down here. The Lyra already had her claws at the junction panel. Ventilation shaft, 60 degrees to the left. How do you know? She gave him a glance. Because I helped design the fail-safes for these exact situations. Remind me never to play poker with you. The air in the subcom chamber grew hot, thick with the metallic scent of heated circuits. Somewhere behind them, a containment door slammed shut with a shudder that echoed through the walls. They're sealing us in, Kale said, flicking his wrist display. Thermal surge building, probably to fry the relay. We've got maybe 60 seconds before the heat spikes. The Lyra was already prying open the shaft panel with a tool pulled from beneath her belt sash, elegantly crafted, but clearly more than decorative. The ventilation grid leads to the east wing filtration node. If we can get there before they complete the purge, we can access another terminal. Kale dropped into a crouch beside her. Why would they burn the relay logs unless they knew we had something? Because we found something they never wanted seen, she said. Sen's betrayal was just a blade. The hand holding it is much larger. The panel gave way with a hiss. Warm air rushed into the chamber, carrying the scent of ozone and coolant. The Lyra climbed in first, her tail flicking past Kale's chest as she disappeared into the narrow shaft. Stay close, she called back. No problem, he grunted, following her into the dark. The crawl space twisted through the station's hidden spine. Pipes, glowing fiber optic cords, and old bolt plating made navigation a brutal crawl. Every movement jostled Kale's injured leg, but he gritted his teeth and pressed on. They reached a drop vent. The Lyra glanced back. We're above the maintenance junction. Drop down. I'll follow. Kale eased into the shaft and let go. He landed in a crouch on a graded walkway just as the alarm above them ceased. The hum of station power returned, eerily normal, as if nothing had happened. The Lyra dropped beside him a moment later, her landing silent. For a moment, the corridor was still. Then, footsteps. Heavy. Coordinated. Kale shoved the Lyra behind a stack of sealed containers. Guards. Not ours. The door at the far end slid open with military precision. 3 figures entered, clad in hybrid combat gear, Varelli body armor reinforced with human tactical padding. Illicit. Unauthorized. One carried a scanning device. The other 2 held rifles pointed low, but ready. They're mercs, Kale whispered. Probably hired to keep this quiet. Not doing a great job, the Lyra muttered. Kale drew his sidearm and nodded toward the corner. Distraction or confrontation? The Lyra's claws slid from their sheaths with a faint shimmer of light. I vote confrontation. She sprang from cover before Kale could object, sweeping in low and fast. The nearest merc barely raised his rifle before her foot connected with his chest, slamming him into the wall. Kale moved, fast and hard, his blaster already firing. He winged the second merc in the shoulder, then rolled to the left as the third opened fire. Plasma bolts scorched the air around them, illuminating the corridor in violent red. The Lyra spun, tail whipping around as she slashed the leg of her opponent. He howled, dropping to a knee. Kale took him down with a shot to the side. The corridor fell quiet again. Both stood panting, bodies tense, hearts racing. You move like you've done that before, Kale said, holstering his weapon. The Lyra flicked blood from one claw and raised an eyebrow. You don't grow up Varelli nobility without learning to defend yourself. He smiled despite the pain in his leg. Remind me again who's guarding who? She smirked, tail curling around her ankle. I believe it's mutual now. They dragged the unconscious merc behind a sealed access panel and activated a localized static field to block comms. The Lyra knelt beside him, her hands swift and methodical as she searched his armor. No insignia, she muttered. No command tags. But this. She held up a small chip reader from the inner chest pocket. Encrypted orders. Kale crouched beside her. Can you break it? Not here. But if we get to the Council archive servers, yes. Kale's eyes narrowed. The archive's under secure lockdown. You'd need a diplomat's seal. I have one, the Lyra replied, voice flat. Or I did. Unless Virexen invalidated it. He studied her. Her fur, though matted and dusted with ash, still shimmered in places. Her eyes glowed in the dim corridor light, but not with fear. With quiet fury. What happens if you access that data and it leads to someone higher up? Kale asked. She met his gaze. Then we burn their name into the sky. He stood. Let's move. Before more of their friends decide to show up. As they made their way toward the elevator to the council tower, Kale kept scanning the walls, the corners, the overheads. He'd served on military stations, on planetary forward bases, on civilian outposts. But never had he seen one so tainted. Delira noticed his silence. You're angry. I'm used to knowing who the enemy is, he said. But when it's coming from within, I hate this kind of war. She nodded. You and I aren't so different. They reached the outer corridor of the council archives, quiet, sealed, with a single armored guard stationed outside the doorway. Kale grabbed Thalira's arm. Wait. What? He pointed. I know him. That's Commander Ryle. Loyalist. Human side. He might help. Delira stepped forward slowly, hands raised. Commander Ryle. He turned, startled at first, then his face tightened with recognition. Ambassador Delira? He blinked. And Draven? You're both flagged in the system as rogue operatives. We were nearly assassinated, Kale said bluntly. The security override logs were falsified. She's carrying encrypted orders from a hired merc that tried to kill her. Ryle looked between them. You can't be here. Delira held up her diplomatic band. I still have clearance. Let us in, and you'll see everything. He hesitated. Looked down the corridor. Then stepped aside and keyed open the archive door. Inside, the chamber was dark except for the cold blue glow of active consoles. Shelves of data stacks climbed the walls. Delira moved like she belonged there, because once she had. Her claws tapped quickly on the reader as she inserted the merc's chip. Kale stood watch. Then the screen lit up. Lines of code scrolled fast. Orders. Transfers. Names. One of them made Kale's stomach twist. Ambassador Kale Vorn, Human Unity Council. He stepped forward, jaw tightening. That's the Grand's deputy. He's been in every private negotiation session since this began. Thalira's fur rippled with tension. He authorized the hit. Cross-species directive. Used mercenaries with hybrid gear to frame a Varelli splinter group. Kale's fists clenched. It's not just corruption. It's sabotage. The treaty, the station, everything. It's worse, Delira whispered. This plan goes back months. And it was meant to end with both sides blaming each other. Her voice caught in her throat, but she forced herself to speak. They wanted war. The archive chamber's lights dimmed as the terminal completed the download. A soft ping signaled the transfer of decrypted data to Thalira's personal wrist drive. She stared down at it, her golden eyes unreadable, tail curled tightly around one leg. Kale Vorn isn't just covering up a failed assassination, she said, voice tight. He's orchestrating a manufactured collapse of the treaty. He's been feeding both sides, human and Varelli, just enough chaos to push them to the brink. Kale's hands flexed at his sides. And we're the last thread holding this mess together. Footsteps echoed from the outer corridor. Kale motioned Delira behind a nearby pillar. Ryle, still posted at the door, held up a hand toward the approaching figures. Hold. This level's restricted. Step aside, Commander, barked a voice that made Kale's blood run cold. Counselor Kale Vorn entered, flanked by two uniformed guards in black, unmarked gear. Thalira's claws twitched. Vorn's cool gaze swept the chamber. I thought I smelled smoke. What a disappointment to find it's just you two. Kale stepped out from behind the console, weapon drawn. You're under investigation for conspiracy against the Echelon Accord. Step down. Vorn laughed. Still playing Soldier Draven? Delira appeared beside Kale, no longer hiding, the data chip held high. This contains authorization trails linking you to the mercenaries who attempted my assassination. You'll be tried for treason on both sides. One of Vorn's guards shifted, uncertain. Vorn's smile faded. And what if I end this now? He said, reaching slowly inside his coat. Kale fired first. The pulse hit Vorn's shoulder, knocking him backward. His guards hesitated, then dropped their weapons. Ryle stepped forward, eyes wide but steady. Get that data to the council chamber, he said to Kale. Now. Kale grabbed Thalira's hand and they ran, boots echoing through the marble halls, the tension in the air coiling tighter with every step. As they reached the lift to the Grand Assembly, Delira turned to him, breathless. "We're about to put everything on the line." He stared at her. "I already did." The lift doors opened. Inside, the chamber blazed with voices. Dozens of delegates filled the room, some standing, others shouting over one another. It was chaos. Until the Lyra stepped into the center and raised the chip above her head. "Silence!" she called. The room froze. "We have proof," she said, voice clear and resonant, "of a plot designed to fracture this alliance. Orchestrated by Councillor Cale Vorn with mercenaries and misinformation to incite war between our peoples." Gasps. Murmurs. She placed the chip into the primary display terminal. Cale stood beside her, unwavering, as the screens around the chamber lit up with records, orders, encrypted messages, all damning. When the final log played, a recording of Vorn authorizing the hit on Lyra, no one moved. Then, slowly, Elder Varn of the Varelli rose. "Let this council bear witness." He turned toward the delegation. "We stand today not on the edge of ruin, but at the gate of something harder. Truth. And rebuilding." As the council erupted with calls for arrest, investigations, and security reform, Cale felt a shift inside him. Not relief, not yet, but clarity. The fight wasn't over. But they'd made it through the worst of the storm. Beside him, the Lyra reached out, her fingers brushing his. No longer just a gesture of safety, but of solidarity. Of something neither of them had the words for yet. The chamber buzzed with urgency as delegates surrounded the main terminal, shouting for clarity, demanding action. Guards moved in to escort Councillor Cale Vorn from the archive level, alive, barely, and silent beneath the weight of what had been exposed. Cale and Lyra remained near the center, a quiet axis in the storm of unfolding consequences. The Lyra's voice cut through the din, steady and cold. "Let the record show, this alliance did not falter because of chaos. It endured because of those willing to stand against it." Commander Vega, recently reinstated as the human security head after the cleansing of compromised ranks, stepped into the circle. "Sergeant Draven, the panel will need your testimony, full debrief, recorded statement, and frankly, a very good explanation for why you disobeyed over a dozen protocols." Cale stood taller, blood dried in streaks along his jawline, uniform half scorched. "Would you believe I was just doing my job, sir?" Vega sighed, rubbing his temple. "I'd believe it. Doesn't mean the paperwork will be easy. Don't worry," the Lyra added with a sly glance. "I'll be filing diplomatic immunity for him personally." A ripple of laughter, uneasy but real, echoed among the assembly. Outside the chamber, Cale and Lyra finally stepped into the quiet of a suspended walkway stretching over the outer shell of Echelon Spire. Through the transparent panels, the cosmos shimmered, a black sea speckled with light. The chaos behind them felt distant. They stood in silence for a long time. Then Cale spoke. "When I was assigned here, I expected politics, silence, and maybe a few boring patrols. And instead," the Lyra murmured, turning to face him, "you tackled me to the floor, violated 36 laws, and held my life in your hands. I don't regret any of it." She studied him. "Neither do I." Her hand brushed his. This time, she didn't pull back. "In Varelli culture," she said softly, "when blood is shed protecting another, it forms what we call a shale vireth, a bond of loyalty beyond duty. But when that blood is freely given and received, it becomes a shale car." He blinked. "And that means?" "That we're bound." Cale stepped closer. "Is that what you want?" She looked up at him, amber eyes glowing like twin suns. "It's already happened." He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He leaned down, slowly, and kissed her, not as a soldier or a guard, or even a man bound by duty, but as someone who had bled, fought, and changed for her. She kissed him back, slow, knowing, dangerous. And when they parted, she whispered, "Let them write 1,000 rules. We'll break the ones that don't deserve to hold us." The stars turned silently overhead. Their war was over. Their story was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the trial of Councillor Cale Vorn and the unveiling of the cross-faction conspiracy. The galaxy, it seemed, had paused to breathe, uneasy but hopeful. On the surface, the Echelon Accord stood stronger than ever. Joint patrols were active across the outer sectors. Trade resumed. The Vareli and human delegations issued public statements of renewed commitment. But beneath the diplomacy and smiles, old wounds festered in shadowed corners. And Cale Draven didn't trust shadows. He stood now on the edge of Cyralis Base 2, the first fully integrated settlement under the Accord's administration. The outpost was carved into the cliffs of a quiet, wind-blasted world with twin suns and red dust that clung to everything. His boots were already coated with it. The Lyra's voice came through his calm, soft and amused. "You're scowling again. That usually means you're thinking about something dangerous, or something stupid. Which is it today?" "Both," he muttered, tapping the mic on his collar. "We've had 3 supply delays in 2 weeks. And that coded burst last night. It didn't originate from any council beacon. Someone's piggybacking our network." From behind, the light shuffle of boots and claws announced her arrival. Belira stepped into view, tail swaying lazily, a dark cloak draped over her light armor. The wind played with her fur, but she didn't seem to notice. "Still trying to control everything," she said with a faint smile. "Still trying to keep you alive," Cale countered. She reached for his hand, gloved, calloused, and held it quietly. "You won't always be able to." "Doesn't mean I'll stop trying." Behind them, the outpost shimmered under the morning light. But in the distance, a faint pulse blinked against the horizon, barely visible. Not a storm. A signal. Cale narrowed his eyes. "That's not part of our grid." The Lyra's ears twitched. Trouble again. And this time, it wasn't coming for them from within. It was coming from the dark between stars. The blinking light against the crimson horizon pulsed 3 times, slow, deliberate. A beacon. But not one Cale recognized. He adjusted his scope, zooming in on the flash. It was anchored to a shard of wreckage half buried in the dunes, probably from an old survey drone or a broken transport pod. Belira tilted her head. "That's not ours. And it's not standard Vareli patterning either." "Human?" Cale asked. She shook her head. "Too erratic. It's designed to mimic multiple signals, like it's trying to be misidentified." Cale holstered his weapon and pulled up the interface on his wristband. "I'm pinging it. Let's see what it spits back." They waited. The wind howled. Then, // ping returned, origin unknown. Language packet, unclassified. Warning, hybrid encryption detected. Cale frowned. "That's not council-grade encryption." "No," Belira said slowly, eyes narrowing. "That's black site." Cale's heart dropped. "You think it's tied to Vorn's network? Or something worse?" she murmured. "Whoever placed that signal expected it to be found, eventually." He looked at her. "This colony's only 3 months old. They couldn't have planted it recently, not without alerting base sensors. Which means it was here before us." The implications chilled them both. If someone had embedded a signal relay before the colony's founding, it meant this place was never as clean as the council claimed. It was a pawn. A staging point. Belira turned on her heel. "We need to extract that beacon and trace it manually. If it's active, someone's still listening." Cale stepped in front of her. "I go first." "You're still doing that thing," she said, annoyed. "What thing?" "Throwing yourself into danger like I'm made of glass." He smirked. "You're not glass. You're the heat that bends it." She sighed, then allowed herself a flicker of amusement. "Poetic. Still reckless. Guilty as charged." Together, they left the safety of the outpost's perimeter. The desert winds screamed louder beyond the shielded zone. Fine sand bit into exposed fur and fabric. Visibility dropped with every step toward the blinking light. Cale's weapon remained low but ready. The Lyra's claws were unsheathed, gleaming faintly in the sunlight. It wasn't just the signal that worried her. It was the silence surrounding it. No wildlife. No drones. No sound. They reached the half-buried wreck. Kale crouched beside it, carefully peeling away the outer shell with a multi-tool. Inside, embedded in a twisted bracket, was a black node. It pulsed faintly with blue light and bore a sigil either of them recognized, a double-ringed eye encased in a diamond. Thalira's fur bristled. That's not Varelli. That's older. Kale glanced up at her. You've seen it before? No, she said. But I've read about it. That mark belongs to a faction that hasn't spoken to either of our peoples in over a century. He rose slowly. You're talking about the Albais. The Lyra nodded once. And then the beacon clicked. A mechanical ping echoed across the canyon, and a secondary signal activated beneath the sand. Oh no, Kale muttered. That was a handshake protocol. The Lyra stepped back as the earth trembled. They weren't alone. The tremor built slowly at first, a soft rumble beneath the soles of their boots, like the planet itself had suddenly drawn breath. Then the dune beside them erupted. A geyser of sand exploded into the air, followed by a sharp, metallic grinding. Something huge was rising beneath the surface. Move! Kale shouted, grabbing Thalira's arm as the ground fractured. They dove behind the husk of the old survey pod just as a massive, jagged structure breached the surface. Not a machine. Not fully. It rose like a buried fin, smooth, hexagonal plating lined with glowing blue seams. Half of it still entombed beneath the sand, but its presence was undeniable. Is that a ship? Kale breathed, stunned. The Lyra slowly rose from cover, her eyes wide, voice quiet with reverence and dread. Not a ship. An Albais monolith. A relay shrine. Kale turned toward her. I thought the Albais vanished a century ago. They didn't vanish, she said. They withdrew, cut off all ties. No one's seen their tech this intact since the core exodus. This is sacred architecture. Ancient, layered. And awake. The beacon pulsed again, faster this time. A soft whir began to emanate from deep within the exposed structure. Glyphs lit up along its surface. Circular patterns. Moving language. The Lyra squinted at them, her tail twitching. It's not broadcasting. What's it doing? Scanning. Kale's hand tightened on his weapon. Scanning us? Before she could answer, a sudden wave of pressure hit them like a windless concussion. No sound, no shockwave, just a presence. A pulse that seemed to pass through them, into their bones. Then a voice, not spoken, but impressed directly into their minds. Two bound in defiance. Echoes of what was broken. Pattern confirmed. The Lyra gasped, clutching her head. It's speaking inside my skull. Kale gritted his teeth. I hear it too. What the hell is pattern confirmed supposed to mean? Before she could respond, a smaller shape began to rise from the monolith's side, a sphere of transparent material suspended by thin columns of glowing filaments. Inside the sphere, a pale blue crystal pulsed with rhythmic light, like a heart. A hologram bloomed above it. A figure, cloaked and faceless, eyes glowing white behind a silver mask. This world is marked. The projection intoned. Initiate Phase 2. Bonded catalysts identified. Observation no longer sufficient. Action required. The monolith pulsed one final time. Then the beacon disintegrated into ash. Kale and Lyra stood frozen in the windswept silence, the enormity of what they'd just witnessed sinking in like gravity. Kale turned to her, his voice low and grim. We didn't just find an old signal. The Lyra nodded slowly. We woke something. The wind returned first, blowing grit across the monolith's crystalline shell, coating it in dust and silence once more. But the silence was wrong. It felt expectant. As if the structure was now watching. Waiting. The Lyra crouched beside the crystal's remnants, fingers hovering just above where the beacon had vaporized. The Albais didn't just build this to observe. This structure, it recognized us. It reacted to our bond. Kale stared at her. That phrase it used, bonded catalysts, what does that mean in your culture? She rose, eyes sharp, voice quieter than before. It doesn't. But in older texts, the early philosophers believed some unions had cosmic resonance. That in rare instances, bonds between beings could align with ancient forces, tapping into patterns etched into the fabric of the stars. Most thought it was poetic nonsense. And now? She turned to him, golden eyes shimmering. Now I'm wondering if the Albais believed it was prophecy. Kale blew out a breath and surveyed the landscape. The monolith stood like a black tooth in the sand, half buried, partially dormant again, but alive. He pulled out his calm. Chun, this is Draven. We need a containment team and 3 layers of blackout. I want this location locked down tighter than the old vault rings. A hiss of static. Then, Sergeant, you need to return to base. Now. We've got a situation. What kind of situation? Kale snapped. Chen's voice was clipped. Ambassador Vyrek, Senator, he just landed. And he's demanding to speak with Lyra. Kale went cold. What's his clearance status? He's got override codes, from both sides. Human and Virelli. The Lyra's fur bristled. He shouldn't have either. Kale activated the beacon transponder. We'll head back. Secure the monolith perimeter and don't let anyone else near it, not until we're sure it won't wake again. As they hiked back across the canyon, Kale kept glancing sideways at Lyra. Her expression was unreadable. Calm on the surface, but her claws twitched slightly every time Sen's name was mentioned. I thought you trusted him once, Kale said low. I did, she answered. He taught me diplomacy. He shaped how I navigated the council. But he was always careful. Too careful. He never believed in the treaty. Only in the appearance of cooperation. Kale nodded. And now he's back. With the power to bury all of this. They reached the edge of the colony. The outer patrol guards waved them in, faces strained, backs tense. A shuttle, sleek, dark, Virelli make, rested just outside the main hangar. And standing at its foot was Ambassador Vyrekson. Still tall. Still immaculate. His fur was dustless, his garments ceremonial, his face unreadable. The Lyra stepped forward first. Vyrek. He inclined his head. My dear ambassador. How far you've come. She didn't return the bow. He smiled faintly. It's time we spoke. Privately. Kale moved between them. She doesn't go anywhere alone. Vyrek's smile widened, slow and venomous. Ah. So this is the soldier. The Lyra's tail coiled tightly. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of both of us. Very well, Vyrek said, gaze flicking back and forth between them. Then let me begin with this. You've triggered something ancient. Something that should have remained buried. He stepped closer, voice lower now. And there are others who will come for you because of it. The colony's wind howled across the landing zone as Vyreksen's words settled like frost between them. You've triggered something ancient. Kale's hand hovered inches from his holster. Care to explain what you mean by that? Vyrek's eyes flicked to him, unafraid. The Albais were not mere observers of galactic history. They were architects of it. Their monoliths weren't designed to record the past. They were calibrated to act upon key anomalies. He glanced at Lyra. You. 2 species sworn to peace. A bond that was never meant to form. The monolith recognized the impossibility, and validated it. You're saying it, approved of us? The Lyra asked, ears angling back in disbelief. I'm saying, Vyrek replied, that the Albais designed their relics to awaken only in the presence of pattern breakers. You and the human are that. Kale folded his arms. Nice speech. Still doesn't tell us what you're doing here. Vyrek turned his full attention to him. I came because the moment that beacon pulsed, 5 other monoliths across colonized systems lit up. Just for a second. Enough for the hidden ones to notice. Do you understand what that means? The Lyra's voice was quiet, but resolute. It means they're linked. Vyrek nodded. And it means every faction that's been waiting for an excuse to shatter this fragile peace will now move to seize Abai's technology, or destroy anyone bonded to it. Kale felt his gut twist. You're saying there's a hit out on us? There will be, Vyrek replied. Within days. You think the Accord's stable? It's a glass bridge above lava. And you two just set fire to the supports. The Lyran narrowed her eyes. Why warn us? Last time we saw you, you tried to tear the council in half. Vyrek's expression shifted, for a moment, a flicker of something real beneath the diplomat's mask. Because even I didn't know the depth of what we were standing on. We thought we were shaping power. But it turns out. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. We were children playing inside a loaded cannon. Kale stared at him. What do you want from us? Come with me. We leave tonight. I can get you to a dead zone. No scans. No signals. A place where the Albais can't track you, and neither can the factions that want you erased. Thalira's lip curled, fangs barely showing. You think we'd run? I think, Vyrek said, meeting her gaze, that survival buys time. Time to understand what you've bonded with. And what it's becoming. Kale looked to Lyra. Her expression was unreadable. But beneath her silence, her eyes burned. No, she said. Vyrek blinked. No? We won't hide. She continued. We'll gather allies. We'll bring the truth to light before others decide what it means for us. And if the monoliths have awakened, then we won't cower beneath their gaze. Kale stepped up beside her. If we run now, we give everyone else the chance to write the story without us in it. Vyrek's expression flattened. Then you'd better be ready. Because what's coming won't care about truth. Or peace. Or love. He turned toward his shuttle. They'll come for you, he said over his shoulder. The only question is, who gets here first? The ramp hissed closed. The shuttle lifted off and vanished into the clouds above. Kale stood in the silence that followed, then turned to the Lyra. So? Still not scared? Oh, I'm terrified, she said softly. Then she looked at him, a flicker of something wild and determined flashing in her gaze. But I'm not running. The wind died down as Vyrek's shuttle disappeared into the clouds, leaving only the whine of distant power cells and the steady hum of Cyralis base behind. Kale watched the shrinking vapor trail until it vanished. You believe him? He asked. The Lyra was quiet for a moment, arms crossed, tail flicking. I believe he believes himself. Kale grunted. Great. Paranoia and prophecy in one charming package. She turned toward him, her expression softer than he expected. He's right about one thing, this won't stay quiet for long. We lit a flare in a field of dry grass. Kale glanced around the perimeter. Patrols moved along the outer wall, some human, some Virelli. All looked tense. Alert. There was something different now in the way they watched the Lyra and him. Not open hostility. But awareness. You feel it? He murmured. Yes, she said. They're waiting to see what we'll do. What we'll become. He met her eyes. So what do we become? She reached up and gently traced the edge of his jaw with her claws, not sharp, but enough to leave a tingling trail of sensation behind. More than they expect? They didn't sleep that night. There were too many preparations to make. By morning, Kale stood in the command tower's briefing room, a crisp black tactical jacket draped over his shoulder. The Lyra sat at the end of the long table, surrounded by a small circle of loyalists, human and Virelli alike, hand-picked from months of whispered conversations and quiet tests of trust. Chin was there, arms folded, scarred and smiling. So was Lieutenant Rallows, a Virelli pilot with a reputation for ignoring orders that didn't make sense. This is not official, Lyra said, her tone even. Not sanctioned. What we're about to do may be condemned by both governments. Kale stepped beside her. We're building our own team. Not mercenaries. Not idealists. People who know that peace is fragile, but worth defending. Chin raised a brow. Defending from what exactly? Kale keyed the holotable. A projection of the monolith rose from the surface, rotating slowly. Then 5 smaller glyphs pulsed around it. The Albais didn't just build one, he said. When the Cyralis monolith activated, 5 others answered. We're going to find them. And stop whoever's trying to claim them. Rallos clicked his tongue. That'll make us enemies of a dozen factions. Belira smiled faintly. We already are. Silence followed. Then Chin leaned forward and grinned. Well, hell. Let's break some protocol. Rallos nodded. You'll need a fast ship. You have one? Kale asked. I have 2. As the team assembled around them, Belira reached for Kale's hand under the table. He laced his fingers through hers without hesitation. Together, they were more than an alliance. They were a spark in the dark. The Wraithscale was a lean, angular ship with a matte obsidian hull that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Built for stealth reconnaissance but retrofitted with enough firepower to take on a blockade runner, it was Rallos' pride, and now it was theirs. Kale stood beneath the loading ramp, staring up at the sleek frame as crew began to load supplies. Can't believe he had this thing tucked away in a freighter bay under a false registry, Kale muttered. Chin walked past him, carrying a reinforced case of ion dampeners. You really think Rallos flies council colors on anything real? Belira approached, her travel cloak fluttering lightly over her armor. Her fur had been rebrushed, her weapons checked and secured, her voice sharp with intent. It's perfect, she said simply. Kale turned toward her, voice low. Still time to back out. She looked at him, eyes glowing softly in the fading light. And do what? Let others chase down monoliths and rewrite history without us. No, Kale. I was chosen by accident, maybe, but now I choose to matter. He gave a slight nod. That was the Belira he knew, brave, impossible, and standing beside him anyway. Inside the ship, they took their stations. Rallos sat at the helm, his flight jacket draped casually over his seat like he had no fear at all. First stop? He asked. Belira keyed in coordinates. Oryx Drift. Border of abandoned Albais space. The next signal came from there. Chin scoffed. That place is a scrap heap floating through nebular radiation and pirate debris. Perfect for hiding a relic no one wants found, Kale said. The Wraithscale lifted off, silent and swift. As they cleared Cyralis' upper orbit, the stars widened before them, deep, cold, full of purpose. The jump core began to spin. The Lyra reached across the console and tapped the reinforced casing beneath Kale's arm. You ready? Always, he said. But I don't think the galaxy is ready for us. With a flicker of light, the Wraithscale vanished into the drift, leaving behind the last traces of safety, and heading toward secrets too ancient for one species to hold. Out there, the Albais watched. Out there, enemies stirred. And somewhere, monoliths pulsed, waiting to be claimed. The Wraithscale emerged from hypershift into the glowing chaos of the Oryx Drift. Around them, fragments of dead ships rotated slowly through the haze. The entire region was a graveyard of failed colonization attempts, forgotten battles, and half-built stations gutted by time and neglect. Debris floated in gentle arcs, pulled by residual gravitic drift from long-dead engines. The Lyra leaned forward in her chair, fur bristling slightly. That's a lot more wreckage than the last time this region was scanned. Kale swept the area through the main scope. No signs of recent conflict, though. These ships weren't destroyed, they were abandoned. Systems dead, hulls intact. Chin peered over his shoulder. Maybe they were drawn here. Like something was calling to them. Rallos whistled from the helm. Creepy. I like it. The ship crept through the graveyard, engines on silent burn. The Lyra tapped her console and brought up a pulse scanner, then frowned. There's interference, magnetic disruption all around us. Kale raised a brow. Cloaking field? No, she said. A dampening shell? Something is suppressing not just signals, but emotion. Fear, pain, heat, Every sign of life is flattened out here. It's artificial. As if on cue, the scanner pinged. One return. Faint, but unmistakably monolith resonance. It's inside that cruiser, Kale said, pointing to a long, vine-covered vessel tangled in the remains of a smaller freighter. The cruiser was Varelli design, pre-Civil War, ancient. The sigil of an old noble house still clung to the hull, barely legible. That's a lineage ship, Lyra murmured, her voice tense. From the dynasty my house opposed during the War of Splinters. Rallos narrowed his eyes. So what's one of those doing out here in the drift? No record says it ever left the core systems, Lyra whispered. It vanished. Along with half of its bloodline. Kale was already suiting up. Then I guess we find out who, or what, brought it here. Lyra moved to join him, strapping her sidearm to her hip. I go too. Kale gave her a look. I figured. She met his gaze. I'm not letting you face ancient curses and forgotten dynasties without me. Chen snorted behind them. Romantic. Rallos set the ship on autopilot orbit and prepped a tethered glide pod. You two go play archaeologist. I'll keep the lights on. The pod detached, spiraling through the misty graveyard. As they neared the cruiser, the air grew colder. The quiet deeper. And Kale couldn't shake the feeling that something, inside that ship already knew they were coming. The airlock hissed as Kale and Lyra stepped into the forgotten cruiser. Inside, the air was cold and dry, thick with the scent of dust and old coolant. Lights flickered weakly overhead, powered by a failing core that somehow still held on after decades of abandonment. This place shouldn't be intact, Kale murmured, sweeping his weapon through the gloom. It's like the ship refused to die. Lyra walked beside him, her boots barely making a sound. Her hand drifted along the wall, fingertips brushing the faded crest of the ancient Varelli house. This ship was lost during the worst of our civil conflicts. Some believed it was taken by pirates. Others said it answered a calling beyond our stars. They moved deeper into the heart of the vessel, past collapsed halls and silent chambers filled with untouched furniture, old relics, even half-finished meals. Kale's grip on his sidearm tightened. They didn't evacuate. No, Lyra said, ears twitching. They were taken. A doorway opened to a circular chamber, smooth, perfect, untouched by the decay around it. In the center stood another monolith. This one was smaller than the one on Cyralis, but it pulsed with the same deep, intelligent rhythm. It recognized them. And it spoke. Catalyst confirmed. Judgment draws near. Symbols lit up across its surface, spreading outward like veins. Lyra stepped forward. We didn't come to be judged. We came to understand. Why us? Why now? The voice that returned wasn't from the monolith. It echoed from the walls, dozens of whispering tones, layered, unified. Because you chose each other. And that choice is the pattern breaker. Kale stepped beside her. So what happens now? The monolith pulsed once, so bright it cast shadows of themselves on the walls like giants. The last gate opens. Behind the monolith, a hidden wall hissed open. Inside, a stasis pod lay cracked and empty, but something had been there recently. Something that had left. And now the countdown to whatever came next had begun. Kale and Lyra stood at the edge of the opened chamber, staring into the hollow stasis pod. Frost still clung to the inside of the glass. The restraints within had been snapped, not released. Lyra moved slowly, claws tracing the edge. Something woke up. Kale glanced at the monolith. Its light was dimming now, pulse slowing. It knew. It led us here on purpose. Lyra turned to him, her fur bristling. Why lead us to a prison that's already been broken? Maybe, Kale said, because we're the only ones who can stop what got out. Behind them, the soft whir of Rallos's voice cut in overcoms. You two might want to hustle. We've got incoming. Multiple heat signatures entering the drift. Unmarked ships. Varelli design, but wrong. Looks like Abai's hybrid retrofits. Kale's jaw clenched. They found the signal. They're coming for the relic. Or for us. The Lyra keyed her calm. Chin, prep extraction. We'll need orbit clearance in less than 10 minutes. Roger that. Thrusters primed. Better hurry, our new friends are not announcing themselves. Kale turned back to the monolith one last time. What was inside that pod? And again the voice, fainter now, fading into slumber, echoed through the ship. A shadow of those who broke the stars. A sentinel, who remembers what peace once cost. The Lyra stared at the empty pod. And it remembers us. They ran, moving through the dim corridors of the ancient cruiser as distant impacts rocked the hull. Weapons fire. Small arms, then heavier. By the time they reached the airlock, red light bathed the walls. The ray scale hovered just outside, Rallos spinning it into position as pulse bolts streaked past the canopy. Chen's voice crackled again. Shuttle incoming! Get on board, or you're getting spaced with history! Kale grabbed the Lyra's hand and launched across the tether bridge. The ship sealed behind them. Alarms screamed. Shields flared as the ray scale veered hard, engines roaring, climbing through the wreckage-strewn drift as a squadron of unmarked vessels pursued. Inside the command deck, Chin tossed Kale a fresh charge pack. The Lyra fell into the co-pilot's seat, panting. Get us clear! Now! Rallos grinned as he sent the ship into a wild spiral between debris. Hold on to something! As they streaked into the stars, the relic cruiser behind them detonated, not from weapons, but from within. The monolith had erased itself. Kale watched it collapse in the distance, flames curling around the remains. No evidence left, he said. The Lyra shook her head. Just us. Again. He took her hand. Then we carry the truth. Wherever it leads. And somewhere, far beyond Oryx, something that had once slept in silence was stirring again, watching the stars, and the two bonded souls who dared to defy everything they were born into. The rate scale drifted above a quiet moon now, neutral territory, far from the political gridlock and hunter ships they'd narrowly escaped. Below them, soft green plains stretched beneath a sky of twin suns. A world untouched by war. For now. Kale stood at the viewport alone, arms crossed, watching the light pour in. His uniform was torn, stained from weeks of running and fighting, but his grip on his sidearm had finally loosened. Behind him, he heard footsteps. He didn't turn. You ever think we'd make it this far? The Lyra stepped to his side. Her fur had been cleaned, her armor set aside. She wore a loose robe, amber eyes glowing softly in the light. No, she admitted. I didn't think we were supposed to. He looked over at her. But here we are. She nodded. With half the galaxy looking for us, and the other half trying to decide whether we're symbols of hope or threats. He reached for her hand. And what do you think we are? She didn't answer. She just stepped closer and leaned her head against his shoulder, her tail curling around his leg. You saved me, she said. Not just from assassins. From silence. From who I used to be. Kale rested his cheek against her fur. You gave me something to fight for that meant something. Not orders. Not politics. You. They stood like that for a long time. No alarms. No transmissions. No monoliths awakening. Just peace. Later, aboard the ship, Chin handed Kale a datapad. Intercepted transmission from the core. The Albis, they're gone again. Whatever stirred, it's retreating. Like it was testing the waters. The Lyra reviewed the report, eyes thoughtful. They saw enough. They're not done. But they've chosen, for now, not to act. Kale handed the pad back. So we're free? Free, the Lyra echoed. For now. Chin grinned. What are you two going to do with freedom? Kale turned to the Lyra, and she smiled, genuine and fierce. We live. 1 year later, the world beneath the twin suns had become something more than a hideout. A home. Kale tended a small garden outside their shelter, while the Lyra transmitted rare lectures to cultural institutes under a new name. The galaxy went on spinning, its wars quieter, its rulers still debating. But among them, rumors spread. Of a fox-furred exile and the soldier who bled for her. Of monoliths that awaken not to war, but to love. And though most would never know the full truth, a quiet legend was born. One not of conquest, but of connection. And the two who chose it